Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. You are here with Kirk Patrick Miller and Jeffrey Freed. And we also have a special guest, Leslie, and I'll let her introduce herself as well. She's a certified nutritionist, keynote speaker. She has a wonderful podcast on nutrition and just actually restoring a lot of your own health. So we're excited to have her. The topic we're going to be covering is absolutely essential for, especially what this show is more aimed around, which is mental health. And nutrition is absolutely essential. We're finding, everything from just vitamins that are, something somebody is lacking. So if they have a vitamin deficiency, we're seeing like mental health issues. When that is resolved, we're seeing very complex issues. And what I'm referring to is schizophrenia. Actually, with vitamin B12 deficiencies, a lot of people with hallucinations, the hallucinations are vanishing. So nutrition is a big piece. It's always been very important, but it didn't really have I guess it didn't have a lot of support in the medical field. It is gaining a lot of traction now. So it's a really important topic. Leslie, I just want to jump right over to you. You can kind of introduce yourself and let's just talk, nutrition, maybe some things that you've seen in your own work with individuals and some suggestions, and we'll just start a dialogue there.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for having me on tonight or today, wherever you are in this world. Yeah, is that maybe I should just back it up a little. So, as a practitioner in functional health, I am sort of like the middleman. I work one on one with clients and also the medical profession. So, I fit that gap. I kind of bridge the gap with people sometimes feeling like a number, like they've hit the wall, just working with a lot of medical doctors that might have about 2 or 3 hours of the background that I have when it comes to the brain gut health, the emotional triggers, relationships, triggers that we might not even realize with electromagnetic fields that has a lot of research out there that we're finding that as much as it's amazing, like what we're doing now with the 5G towers, it does affect us on a cellular level. So there's a lot of multiple avenues that play into uh, who we are and our genetic tendencies. With epigenetically, we can turn on and off our genes when it comes to eating certain foods and really just taking a look at each person very bio individually. And that's where, and I guess the beauty of what I do. I highly recommend that when you need medical attention, the professional staff is there. But someone like me, we really work and walk one on one as a journey with each individual that has their own book, their own journal, and different ways that we can approach different modalities to help each person out.
Well, I know for me, just the research alone and the data points to how important it is to have, first of all, really, and Jeffrey and I talk about this all the time. And Jeffrey, feel free to jump in whenever you want, but definitely what I'm starting to notice, and I'm glad this is becoming a little bit more of a trend, but when somebody goes in to see a doctor or a psychiatrist, a lot of times instead of just, being prescribed something, right now there's a lot of push to say, okay, are you getting to sleep at the right time? Are you eating the right kinds of foods? Are you exercising? So, hitting those things are so vital. So, Leslie, if you're the person in between the doctors and the individuals, for me, it's a really important step and sometimes even more vital along the long term, especially establishing good habits. I mean, Jeffrey, with your clientele and stuff like that, how much do you see in terms of you know, quality improvement. Have you ever noticed? I mean, it's not something I started paying attention to until a lot later, but when they are starting to eat healthier, I know a lot of the times the individuals we work with gravitate towards unhealthy foods, especially sugars. So, what are your thoughts on it, Jeffrey?
Well, my observations from working with so many different people for so long is that people on the spectrum, people with ADD in particular, love sugar and they love things that activate their cortisol. Um, and the other part of it is the folks I work with are virtually all on the spectrum. They have issues with texture, smell, touch, taste. So eating is brutal when you have those kinds of sensitivities. Anything besides white bread, rice, custard, ice cream, it's like pulling teeth to get them to eat anything besides that, in particular healthy stuff. And what that does, I understand, is it feeds the unhealthy bacteria in the gut. Excuse me. It makes my voice is going. And makes digesting that, really, really stressful. So it's a stress reaction, and it's very, very hard to break with someone, for example, who has incredible sense of smell. Um, Anything smells to them. And if something smells a little rancid or a little strong, they won't touch it. It just is overwhelming to them. So they're going to eat bland foods. And bland foods are usually, I mean, they could be good if you're intelligent when you pick them, but ultimately, bland foods are lacking in any kind of nutrition. And you can't, it's very, very hard to convince them to get them to eat healthfully. You have to sneak this stuff in, like if they're not allergic to milk, yogurt, or plain yogurt, not sweet yogurt with fruit in it, or almond yogurt. It's tough and it's so important. And yeah, to answer your question very directly, I have noticed a big difference in anybody who starts eating healthfully after not eating healthfully. Everything's better. It's important to remember that these are people who have the ones I work with have every single characteristic of people who don't have autism, but they just have more senses. Their senses are heightened. And that's something new too. I don't think until very recently, and even today, there's not a whole, people don't pay that much attention to that. And that's so key. It's so key. So you really need to be creative. You really need to pick recipes that are a little bland, but yet healthy. And you can do it if you start early. And I think you can do it later too, but it's a tough road to hoe.
I would agree. Well, not you mentioned the hypersensitivity, and Leslie, you had mentioned earlier about like the 5G towers. In previous podcasts, Jeffrey and I have talked about, even individuals being able to, often pick up the sounds of just a light bulb being on. There's a lot of sounds and things that, different individuals pick up. There's a spectrum of what people can sense. But when you get into like radio waves, and so I don't know where you were going with that, but it kind of fits in with what we've talked about in the show. Are there some things that, especially when you're trying to get someone who is younger, or whether they're young or an adult, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. But when you're trying to get someone to change, I don't like the word diet, but the way they approach food, that is not an easy thing to do. Are there some things that you found that have been very helpful for people that are maybe less compliant, or they don't want to necessarily change, but they know it's important?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm a firm believer in really assessing and tracking um, not only behavioral patterns, but how we can tie our emotions to what we're eating. And sometimes we don't even realize, like, for example, I slowly integrate, depending on what their age is, uh, slowly trying to integrate people to start recording and tracking. And that means just taking maybe 2 or 3 days and just writing down breakfast, lunch, and dinner, what they're eating, how they are feeling emotionally, how much water intake they're getting every day, and to see if they have any kind of triggers like indigestion. And it's pretty amazing when you start connecting the dots, you start seeing a pattern. And that's something that it could be an aha moment, like, oh, I didn't even realize that. I just have been feeling bloated all the time, or just feeling really depressed after eating a certain food. So this is a beautiful thing to do, is really start to journal, because it can get overwhelming. But if you start slowly and you create that awareness, it really starts playing into unlayering this domino effect of our emotions and what we're eating, and maybe food allergies, which we seem to all have with this leaky gut syndrome with processed and ultra processed foods that the younger generation and we are ingesting.
Well, one thing that you mentioned that, of course, you know, I think you stated it really well. We don't often think of food changing our behavioral, I guess how we behave. What's interesting is we do it it's so obvious when someone has alcohol. And yet, I mean, when you talk about food, no one really likes to look that direction, and they often don't. So I love that. I myself did a nutrition journal, and it was very helpful. And of course, with my mental health issues, one of the things they had me do was track with a mental health, journal. So your mood chart or mood journal. When you tie those two together, I love that. And um, I think part of what you is I'm trying to get to exactly why that's helpful. Do you feel that it helps them when they connect the dots that they then want to comply because they see the evidence?
I think it's especially a yes when they slowly start to integrate some of these, maybe switching out certain foods for something else that might have the same texture, but really looking on the ingredients of the foods. And when you start to feel good, when you have that sense of clarity, when you are sleeping better through the night, and you have that sense of energy or re-energized, it's a beautiful thing. Who would not want to feel healthy? Who doesn't want to feel like their energy is coming back and maybe not having such indigestion or feeling bloated? So when they start slowly seeing some positive changes, you're more apt to want to continue on this journey.
Well, I know for myself, Jeffrey and I have had our own share of, gut issues. And as you were talking about, like the gut and the brain, the just the connection that we know exists between our mind and our gut is kind of mind blowing. I know for myself, I have continued to have stability and improved health. A lot of that I really look at and give credit to my nutrition. So, especially when you brought up textures, because Jeffrey and I have talked about that quite often. Are there some foods that mimic, say, like let's say the most common things most people like, say, ice cream, high in sugar, or um, I'm trying to think of some other really high intensity sugar foods like pop. What are some suggestions that you would have for people that are trying to cut down on sugar? Because that's probably the worst thing out there. Do you have some suggestions? Because that's not easy.
No, it's not easy. However, in this day and age, compared to 20 years ago, when I was trying to figure out alternatives for my kids when they were toddlers, um, there are so many things out there. Just using the natural juices from fruits, blending them. There's no reason why you have to add sugar. I was just looking at some of the pasta, the sauces, when you try to get as healthy as you can, and sugar's added to that too. I mean, what is not on the US shelves that is not radiated with sugar? And we have been so, as we say, it's like that effect, like getting that high. It's like a drug, it's so addictive and it's so hard to wean yourself off of that. But there are so many alternatives to getting away from the refined sugars, which is stripped of all the minerals and nutrients, to go maybe to coconut palm sugar. So if you have an opportunity and you get a chance, start walking down the aisles where there are the organic shells and the different types of swap outs instead of doing the refined sugars.
Yeah, I want to throw in that too. Something to back that up. Um, I've been traveling a lot to different countries, and the food is so much better in those countries, all of them, even what we consider third world countries, simply because they don't put sugar and horrible chemicals in them and yellow dyes and red dyes. I don't get it. Is it that the American people demand sugar or they won't buy it? Or is it because companies realize that, yeah, if you put a lot of sugar in it, more people will like it. And it's just a matter of increasing our profits. So I'm very disappointed when I come back to this country and eat our foods, especially after you've been to a place like Italy or Costa Rica, where the food is so fresh and they don't put any crap in it. I really feel good when I'm in those places. Even something like wine, which makes me sick in the United States, I can drink wine with impunity in Italy. And the wine is organic, it's pure, there's no added sugar. My God, it's just that's what we're fighting. And everybody knows that the United States has like a terrible record with violence and addiction and suicide. I wonder how much of that is affected by our horrible diets and too much sugar and fat in our foods. And I wanted to run that by Leslie too. What do you think of what I just said?
I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think also that we are so brainwashed that we want quick fixes. We don't want lifelong changes. And we want to see instant results, jumping on bandwagons with these crazy diets, these crazy elixirs that you lose that weight quickly, but your habits are not changed. You go right back and it's a vicious cycle. You gain more weight. And yes, you're absolutely right. When I travel overseas, I don't feel bloated when I go to countries like Italy and European countries. I just come back just feeling so good. And sometimes I've actually lost weight, even though I'm eating more.
Yeah, I same thing. Exactly the same experience. I eat like a horse and I lose weight.
You know,
Yeah, it's a shame. What do you think, Kirk?
I the one thing I know that's really interesting in people that want to jump into some of the studies, mitochondrial health and nutrition. If you start looking deep enough, you start seeing that there's absolutely a connection between nutrition and mental health. And so it just is a logical, it's not even a leap. I mean, it's just a logical step to say our nutrition and what we're feeding ourselves, the fast food restaurants, the only affordable food is McDonald's in this country, a lot of times for a lot of people. So, and the food lobbies pour billions into keeping sugar up, milk, dairy. And, for me, as I'm looking at it, we have skyrocketing suicide rates. Well, we have skyrocketing obesity. Well, one of what when you take an SSRI, so an antidepressant, one of the side effects is weight gain. So people gain weight, they feel worse, and they increase their SSRI. And it's a lot of times these things. I'm not saying that nutrition can fix everything or that medications aren't necessary, but I'm saying there is a direct correlation. And any time I see somebody I work with, so if a client comes to me and their child is struggling, almost instantly, the very first thing I say, okay, what's the diet? Across the board, it's usually sugar, high carbohydrates, and not with any fiber. So I know it is a huge key. So anybody listening, I think it's really important to go seek help from someone like Leslie. And Leslie, I'll have you share your information at the end for sure as well, so people can reach out to you. But a lot of times people don't understand that you need not just vitamin D, but if you're low on magnesium, then vitamin D won't work. And if you don't have folate, then there's so much that people need to understand and how these all are connected. And you really need to speak to a nutritionist because they study it. It's really vital. The knowledge that you have, Leslie, will help so many people. So I really, for me, I'm a big believer, and I've always been super passionate about weightlifting, physical health, physical fitness, and nutrition. So nutrition came easy to me because it was part of a passion. For a lot of people, I watched them struggle to even change how they're doing something because they like the taste. Trying to get off of it is challenging. So, I would say for me, for individuals that have needed help or assistance on that, a lot of times I offer. or suggest, make sure they find a ritual, something they reward themselves with, whether that's, a game that they play with their family, watching a show they like. When they eat healthy, and let's say they're giving something up, sugar or alcohol, when they give it up, it's really nice if you can kind of reward yourself,
Right.
because you need a pat on the back. We all do. If you punish yourself as you're taking away something that is what you perceive to be pleasurable, it's not going to work. And so, and I do want to reiterate, Leslie, what you said, people wanting instantaneous gratification, instant fix. That's why we have a culture where everybody wants a pill. And there is no one thing, there's not any magic pill that will help people improve. They have to want it. Nutrition is a very vital piece. And I think it's really right at the epicenter, honestly, of what you can do for yourself. It's one of the few ways you can really empower yourself. That and exercise. You do those two things, and all of a sudden, it's one of the few variables you can control. We can't really control the sound that's out there, or where they build towers. You can choose where you live, so you can choose to live away from some of the stuff, but we don't have as much control with nutrition, with health and sleep, getting up, exercising. Those things are so important. I mean, if you had to give somebody, I know we're kind of closing this down, but if you had to leave people with some really good tips that maybe people don't know about, like maybe whether they're herbs they should use, or maybe vitamins that are often people are not thinking about, what would they be?
Yeah. Wow. Well, I know at night, people say, my mind is constantly racing. Blue lights, like shut down, take the routers, unplug them. A lot of kids have their whole computer system in their room. That in itself, and what we were talking like the EMFs, which there's a lot of research out there about that. Actually Lloyd Burrell, he is from the UK, and he's written a vast amount of books, have done a lot of research with doctors and have really delved into this. But just have quiet time, something that's downtime, even lavender, essential oils that you could have, aromatherapy, teas like chamomile that's calming. Is really important. There are a lot of herbs, there's a lot of teas out there, and there are a lot of things that you can do to have that quiet, peaceful room when you go into your bedroom. And if you can, don't have your phone right next to you when you're, shut that down, turn that off. Your body needs to start to just rest and revitalize for that evening. So that's really key too.
I love that. And then one more question, because it's so important. Not only are we finding the connection between brain health and gut health, but there is a ton about inflammation. So we've talked, Jeffrey and I don't think we've ever talked about it, but of course there's turmeric, there's ginger, and you need black pepper with them. Are there some things that people can do to aim for a more anti-inflammatory diet?
Oh my gosh, 100%. It's called ultra processed and processed foods, packaged foods, chemicals. If you can't read what you are ingesting, stay away from that. Start eating whole foods, start eating in season. And we've all heard this, start eating the colors of the rainbow. And the other critical factor is when I work one on one with people or speaking into groups, it's the fundamental the foundation of your relationship with food that is so key. There's so many emotional eaters out there, especially when we're on fight or flight and everything we've gone through, all these stressors. So
Mm.
that's the thing that is so important to reintroduce and to have a good relationship with food.
Oh, Leslie, you have been spectacular. Jeffrey, do you have any questions for Leslie or some closing comments?
Yeah, I have a closing comment. One of the things that has to change is still so many parents reward good behavior with candy. Our holiday, like Easter, Easter candy, chocolate, Christmas, same thing. Christmas cookies, white bread, sugar. That's got to change. Um, Two things have to change. We have to get people off of their devices, and we have to stop rewarding good behavior or desirable or easy for us behavior with sweets and fatty foods. That would help. You have to start early, and there are people doing it, but certainly not enough. And there are plenty of people out there. What I see a culture that is one extreme or the other. It's like we have people that are really fit and really eat well. They work out, they eat well, they sleep well, they don't put crap in their bodies. And then you have a whole bunch of people who are exactly the opposite. They eat crap, they drink a lot, chemicals. All that matters is that they use food as a reward, and food is, when I say food, sweets and fatty foods and stuff that people make a lot of money on. The companies make a lot of money on. We need to change that, and that's going to be tough. And that's, I guess, my final comment.
I really agree. There were two things. One with the electronics, the light is so important. And I can't quote the exact studies, but I know red light therapy is helping people with either depression or I think mood stabilization. There's some really interesting research, but it's again sounded very, very well researched. So this is coming from a psychiatrist at Harvard, and I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I like him, Dr. Palmer. I think it's Brian Palmer, but the book is Brain Energy, and that one I'd highly suggest people look into. But definitely the devices for the sweets. Honestly, I totally agree with that comment. Leslie, before we end, would you please share the name of your podcast and how people can get hold of you?
Sure. My podcast is called Keep It Dirty, and that's all about getting back to what Mother Earth provides and getting out there and exercising. And I'm on 8 different platforms: Spotify, YouTube. And also, if anybody wants to reach out to me, they could either DM me on my Instagram, which is Keep It Dirty Podcast, or my website and my business is eastwestfunctionaltraining.com.
Oh, Leslie, thank you so much for being here with us. And I kind of wanted to interject your podcast name when Jeffrey was talking about Costa Rica, because he was talking about how that was the whole point of your name of your podcast, is keeping it more natural instead of all the other stuff. So if you're out there, please listen to her podcast. She's giving people free information on nutrition, and she's a wonderful individual. So we'll close it out there, but thank you to everybody for listening, and we deeply appreciate you all. So we'll be back next week. Thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know, and definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.